In the year 2347, the skies above Earth were quiet. Not the peaceful quiet of a calm morning, but the heavy silence that comes after a storm has passed. Except no storm had come. The stars still shone, the sun still rose, and cities still hummed with life, but something fundamental had changed. Humanity had just been told it no longer belonged among the stars. It began with a signal. Not a war warning, not an invasion alert, but a formal message broadcast on every official channel, in every major language, and even in the diplomatic tongues used by Earth's space ambassadors. The Galactic Concord, the vast alliance of over 200 alien civilizations that had governed interstellar affairs for centuries, had made a decision. Earth, along with all its colonies within the Sol system, was banned, permanently. The reasons were listed plainly: unpredictable aggression, rapid and unregulated technological advancement, and what they called cultural contamination risk. To the Concord, humans were too emotional, too fast-moving, too willing to break rules in the name of progress or survival. They had watched humanity leap from primitive radio signals to warp-capable ships in under 300 years, a blink in galactic time, and it frightened them. So they chose isolation over inclusion. Luis Martinez stood on the observation deck of the Luna orbital station, staring at the blue marble of Earth far below. He had spent the last 15 years as a propulsion engineer, working side by side with alien technicians from the Viral and the Cathari to refine jump drive harmonics. He spoke 3 alien dialects, shared meals with beings who breathed methane, and once helped rescue a stranded Zenthian freighter near Neptune. To him, the galaxy had felt like home. Now that home had locked its doors. Down on Earth, in a research lab buried beneath the Arizona desert, Maya Patel watched the same message replay on a loop. She wasn't a soldier or a politician, just a scientist who studied cosmic radiation and its effects on long-range navigation. She had believed in peaceful coexistence. She had argued for it in conferences, written papers on interspecies cooperation, and even taught alien students at the United Earth Academy. The ban felt like a personal rejection, not just of her work, but of everything she thought humanity stood for. Across the planet, reactions varied. Some wept, some raged, others fell into stunned silence. Governments scrambled to respond, but there was little to say. The Concord had cut all communication relays. Their trade ships, once a common sight in orbit, vanished overnight. No more shipments of quantum crystals from the Helios belt. No more medical nanites from the Silent Collective. No more data streams from the Great Archive of Xylos. Earth was alone. At first, panic spread. Stock markets crashed. Food prices spiked as supply chains relying on off-world nutrients collapsed. Hospitals rationed medicines that could no longer be imported. But within weeks, something unexpected happened. People stopped waiting for help from the stars and started helping each other. Neighborhoods formed repair collectives. Engineers like Luis were called back to Earth to repurpose old tech. Farmers revived soil-based agriculture, no longer dependent on alien-grown protein vats. Maya's lab shifted focus from deep space navigation to improving solar energy capture and atmospheric recycling. The crisis forced innovation, not despair. Still, the emotional weight lingered. Children who had grown up watching alien diplomats on school broadcasts now asked if humans were monsters. Teenagers who dreamed of joining the Interstellar Youth Exchange stared at blank screens where star maps used to glow. The ban wasn't just political, it was psychological. It told humanity it was unwelcome, unsafe, unwanted. Luis returned to Earth on a shuttle that felt emptier than ever. No alien passengers, no shared jokes in broken standard. Just humans, quiet and tense. He landed in New Mexico, where his sister Rosa waited with a hug and a pot of real coffee. Beans grown in a greenhouse, not synthesized. "They don't know us," she said simply. They never really tried. Maya, meanwhile, received a classified summons from the Unified Earth Council. In a secure bunker beneath Geneva, she met with generals, scientists, and diplomats. The mood was grim but determined. "We can't beg," said Counselor Elena Ruiz, her voice steady. "But we can build. We can learn. We can prove them wrong. Not with weapons, but with what we create on our own." That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She walked to the edge of the compound and looked up. The stars were the same as always, cold, distant, indifferent. But for the first time, She didn't see them as destinations granted by others. She saw them as challenges to be met on human terms. Back in his apartment, Luis sketched designs on a tablet. Old Concorde schematics mixed with his own ideas. Ways to boost engine efficiency without quantum stabilizers. Methods to recycle ship hulls into new frames. Even concepts for a drive that didn't rely on the Concorde's tightly controlled jump lanes. It was rough, untested, maybe impossible, but it was theirs. The ban had been meant to shrink humanity, to tuck it away in its little solar cradle and let it fade into obscurity. Instead, it lit a fire, not the kind that burns cities, but the kind that forges steel. People began talking less about rejoining the Concorde, and more about what Earth could become without it. Could they build better ships? Cleaner energy? Fairer systems? The question wasn't if they could survive alone. It was what kind of civilization they would choose to be. Weeks turned into months. The initial shock wore off, replaced by a quiet, grinding determination. Factories that once assembled consumer drones now produced oxygen recyclers and radiation shields. Universities shifted curricula to focus on self-sufficiency. Even artists and writers turned their work toward themes of resilience and reinvention. Luis joined a new project called Sol Forge, a secret initiative to retrofit decommissioned freighters into deep space vessels using only human-made parts. Maya began collaborating with bioengineers to develop crops that could grow in Martian soil, without alien fertilizers. Neither knew if their work would lead anywhere, but they worked anyway. And in homes, schools, labs, and shipyards across the planet, a new phrase began to circulate, not as a slogan, but as a simple truth. If they won't let us in, we'll build our own door. The galaxy had closed its gates, but Earth, for the first time in generations, was looking inward and upward, not with shame but with purpose. The ban hadn't ended humanity's story. It had just turned the page. 5 years after the ban, Earth no longer waited for permission to reach the stars. The silence from the Galactic Concorde had become a kind of fuel. Without alien trade, without shared knowledge, without even a single diplomatic ping, humanity had done what it always did when cornered. It built. Luis Martinez stood inside Hangar 7 on the edge of the Nevada desert, sweat soaking through his shirt despite the cool air pumped in from underground vents. Around him, the skeleton of a ship rose like a steel bird mid-flight. It was built from the bones of old cargo haulers, mining drones, and even parts stripped from decommissioned defense satellites. Nothing fancy. Nothing borrowed. All human. He wiped grease from his hands and looked up at the main engine housing. This was the third prototype this year. The first two had failed badly. One exploded during a ground test. The other made it to low orbit before its core destabilized and forced an emergency return. But this one, they called it Helios 3, felt different. The team had spent months refining the magnetic containment field, using new alloys developed in underground labs. They couldn't copy the Concorde's quantum lane drives, so they'd invented something else. A pulse-based jump system that bent local space-time in short, controlled bursts. It wasn't as fast, but it was theirs. Nearby, Derek Owens adjusted his flight suit, his eyes fixed on the cockpit mock-up. At 26, he was one of the youngest test pilots in the Sol Defense Corps, but also one of the best. He'd grown up watching old videos of Concorde ships gliding through nebulae like dancers. Now he trained in simulators that ran on recycled server parts and dreamed of flying something real. "You sure this thing won't shake apart halfway to Jupiter?" he asked, half joking. Luis smiled. "Only one way to find out." Meanwhile, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Maya Patel worked in a facility so secure it had no name, just a number. Project Aegis wasn't just about defense. It was about survival. With no access to alien shielding tech, her team had turned to Earth's own resources. They studied lightning, volcanic plasma, even the magnetic fields of migrating birds. From that, they developed layered energy deflectors powered by compact fusion cores, small enough to fit on a scout ship, strong enough to withstand solar flares and micrometeorite storms. But propulsion and shielding weren't enough. To truly stand alone, Earth needed food, medicine, and materials that didn't rely on off-world sources. In domes across Mars and the Moon, botanists like Lena Ruiz, Elena's younger sister, engineered wheat that grew in red soil using only recycled water and artificial sunlight. Doctors synthesized antibiotics from modified fungi. Factories printed tools, circuit boards, even replacement limbs using 3D printers fed by asteroid-mined metals. The change wasn't just technological, it was cultural. Children in schools learned engineering alongside history. Artists painted murals of human ships sailing past Saturn's rings, not as guests but as pioneers. The phrase "made on Earth" became a mark of pride, not limitation. Still, not everything went smoothly. Power shortages hit coastal cities when old reactors failed. A failed crop in the Luna greenhouse caused a month of rationing. And whispers of doubt lingered in some corners. What if they were wasting time? What if the Concorde was right and humanity truly wasn't ready? But every time morale dipped, something happened to lift it. A new alloy that doubled engine life. A breakthrough in AI navigation that let ships plot courses without Concorde star charts. A message from a Mars colony saying their first fully Earth-grown apple tree had bloomed. Luis often walked the perimeter of the hangar at night, looking up at the stars. He remembered the first time he'd seen a Virel diplomat, tall, silver-skinned, speaking in soft chimes. Back then, he'd felt small, like humanity was just catching up. Now he felt something else, responsibility, not to impress the galaxy, but to protect his own people. Derek, for his part, trained harder than ever. He ran obstacle courses in full-gravity simulators, memorized emergency protocols until they were muscle memory, and spent hours in the cockpit mock-up, imagining the feel of real controls under his hands. He knew the risks. If Helios 3 failed, he might not come back. But someone had to fly it, and if Earth was going to reach beyond the Sol system again, it needed pilots who believed in the mission. Maya, too, carried weight. Her team's work would determine whether future ships could survive long journeys. She rarely slept more than 4 hours a night. Her desk was covered in notes, schematics, coffee cups. Once, a young intern asked her why she pushed so hard. She paused, then said, "Because out there someone might need us, and we won't be able to help if we're still asking for help. Ourselves." The turning point came in the spring of 2352. Helios 3 completed its first successful unmanned jump to the edge of the Kuiper Belt and back. The data was flawless. Energy use was within limits. Structural stress was minimal. For the first time, humanity had a working FTL drive that didn't depend on anything alien. The Council approved a crude test. Derek would pilot it. The mission: fly to the outer rim of the Sol system, deploy a new deep space beacon, and return. Simple, symbolic, dangerous. The night before launch, Luis met Derek at the mess hall. They sat in silence for a while, eating rehydrated stew. "You scared?" Luis finally asked. "A little," Derek admitted, but more excited. "This isn't just a test flight. It's a message. To who? To everyone. To the Conquered. To ourselves. That we're still here. That we're moving forward." The next morning, under a pale dawn sky, Helios 3 lifted off. No fanfare. No alien observers. Just a few hundred engineers, scientists, and soldiers watching from the control room. As the ship vanished into the upper atmosphere, then blinked out in a ripple of blue light, a quiet cheer rose, not loud but firm. Maya watched from Geneva, her hands clasped tight. Lena watched from Mars, her face lit by a screen. Rosa, Luis's sister, watched from her garden in New Mexico, whispering a prayer to no god in particular, just hope. 3 days later, Derek returned. The mission was a success. The beacon now pulsed steadily from beyond Pluto, broadcasting a signal in human code. "This is Earth. We are open for contact." It wasn't an empire yet, not even close, but it was a beginning. And in the workshops, labs, and shipyards across the Sol system, people kept building, not for approval but for tomorrow. The galaxy had turned its back, but Earth, piece by piece, was learning to stand on its own. The signal came on a Tuesday. Not a loud alarm, not a flashing red alert, just a faint, repeating pulse picked up by the new deep space array near Titan. At first, the analysts thought it was interference. Then they realized it was a distress call. And it wasn't human. Luis Martinez was elbow-deep in a reactor coil when the message reached him. He wiped his hands and listened to the recording in the command briefing room. The voice, if it could be called that, was layered with static and strange harmonics, but the pattern was clear. Help, danger, fleeing. Coordinates placed the source just beyond the orbit of Neptune, near the edge of the Sol system's gravitational reach. Maya Patel heard the news an hour later while reviewing atmospheric data from the Mars domes. She frowned. The ban was still in place. Any contact with non-human life could be seen as a violation by the conquered. But this wasn't the conquered. This was someone running from them. Derek Owens was the first to speak up during the emergency council session. "We can't ignore it," he said, standing in his flight uniform. "They're in our space. They're hurt. That makes it our problem." Not everyone agreed. Some council members warned that aiding an unknown species could provoke the conquered. Others feared disease, sabotage, or traps. But Elena Ruiz, now head of Earth's external affairs, looked around the room and said quietly, "If we turn away someone in need just because we're afraid, then the Concord was right about us." The decision was made. A rescue mission would launch within 48 hours. Derek would pilot the Helios 4, a newer, faster version of his test ship, equipped with medical bays and translation software built from old Concorde data fragments. Luis would oversee ship readiness. Maya would lead the science team analyzing the alien signal and preparing quarantine protocols. 2 days later, Helios 4 jumped to the coordinates. What they found was a small, teardrop-shaped vessel, half its hull scorched, drifting silently. Life signs were weak but present. Using robotic arms, they docked and sealed the alien ship inside Helios 4's cargo bay. Only then did they open the hatch. Inside were 3 beings barely conscious, tall and slender, with smooth gray skin and large dark eyes that blinked slowly. They breathed a mix of nitrogen and argon, so Earth's air was poison to them. Derek and his crew moved fast, placing them in environmental pods filled with their native atmosphere. One of them stirred, reaching out a 3-fingered hand toward Derek. No words, just a look of exhausted gratitude. Back on Earth, the aliens, soon identified as Cathari from fragmented star charts in their ship's logs, were moved to a secure biocontainment facility beneath the Canadian tundra. Maya met them through a transparent barrier. She activated the translation matrix, feeding it sounds from their ship's logs. After hours of trial, a voice emerged, soft and raspy. "They hunt us," the lead Cathari said. Her name later learned as Vela. "The Concorde calls us unstable, unfit. We only wish to live free." Maya listened. The Cathari weren't warriors. They were scholars, healers, farmers. Their crime? Refusing to join the Concorde's mandatory genetic registry, which they believed stripped species of their natural evolution. When they fled, Concorde patrols chased them across 3 sectors. Their ship was damaged in the last skirmish. They had nowhere else to go. The council debated again. Helping the Cathari openly defied the ban, but turning them away meant sending them to death. In the end, Earth chose compassion. Luis visited the facility a week later. He brought schematics of human water recyclers, hoping to adapt them for Cathari needs. Vela studied them with quiet fascination. "Your machines are rough," she said through the translator, "but full of heart." Derek returned to space soon after, this time not to test engines but to scout for safe zones. The Cathari had mentioned other refugee groups hiding in the void between stars. If Earth was going to offer shelter, it needed to know where to look. Meanwhile, word began to spread, not through official channels, but through whispers on encrypted networks used by fringe traders and independent asteroid miners. Humans had helped the Cathari. They hadn't asked for payment. They hadn't demanded loyalty. They just helped. A month later, another signal came. This time from a damaged freighter near the Oort cloud, carrying a family of Zenthians, another species blacklisted by the Concorde for cultural non-compliance. Earth sent a ship. They brought them home too. Each rescue was small, quiet, unannounced. No banners, no broadcast. But across the outer rim of known space, a new story began to grow. The humans were different. They didn't conquer. They didn't control. They offered a hand. Maya worked closely with Vela, learning about Cathari bioengineering. In return, she shared Earth's advances in sustainable farming. Together, they designed hybrid crops that could grow in both Earth and Cathari soil. Luis and his team studied Cathari hull materials, discovering a lightweight alloy that could make human ships faster and safer. It wasn't trade. It was partnership. Derek flew more missions, each one farther out. He met beings with 6 limbs, with no eyes, with voices like wind through crystal. He learned to greet them not as aliens, but as neighbors in need. And each time he returned, Earth felt less like a lonely planet and more like a port in a storm. The Concord noticed. Patrols increased near Sol's borders. Warning messages were sent, unofficial, unsigned, but clear. Stop interfering. Earth ignored them. Back in New Mexico, Rosa planted a new garden. This time she included seeds from Cathary nutrient pods modified to grow in Earth soil. The first sprouts were pale blue but strong. She smiled as she watered them. In Geneva, Maya stood before the council again. "We're not breaking the ban," she said. "We're showing what the ban missed. Humanity isn't a threat. We're a refuge." And in hangars, labs, and quiet homes across the system, people began to understand. An empire isn't built with weapons or laws. It's built with trust. With shared meals, with open doors, the Cathari stayed, not as guests but as friends. And as more outcasts found their way to Sol, Earth didn't just survive alone, it became a beacon. Not because it shouted the loudest, but because it listened first. The message arrived without warning. It came not as a plea this time, but as a command. Broadcast on every frequency Earth used for deep space communication, it bore the seal of the Galactic Concord and the signature of Admiral Corvus, commander of the Outer Rim Fleet. The words were short and sharp. Cease all contact with non-Concord species immediately, or face consequences. Luis Martinez read the message in the dim light of the Nevada hangar, his hands still stained with engine oil. He didn't speak. He just folded the printout and tucked it into his pocket like a bad omen. Around him, workers continued assembling the frame of a new ship, larger than any before, meant to carry supplies and refugees across the outer system. No one stopped. No one even looked up. They had expected this. Maya Patel received the same message in her lab beneath the Rockies. She studied it for a long time, then turned to her team. "They're scared," she said. "Not of our weapons, of our example." Derek Owens was in orbit when the alert came through. He'd just delivered medical supplies to a Cathari settlement on a moon near Saturn. He listened to the transmission twice, then switched off the comm. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. His actions had already spoken. Earth's Council met that night in Geneva. Some members argued for compliance. "We're not ready for war," one said. "One Concorde cruiser could wipe out our entire fleet." But Elena Ruiz stood at the head of the table, calm and firm. "We're not being asked to fight. We're being asked to betray people who trusted us. That's not who we are." The decision was unanimous. Earth would not stop helping those in need. The Concorde's ban had already been broken, not with violence but with kindness. Now they would stand by that choice. Within weeks, Concorde ships appeared at the edge of the Sol system. Sleek, silver and silent, they formed a blockade just beyond Pluto's orbit. No shots were fired. No demands were shouted. But their presence was clear. No ship leaves. No ship enters. At first it worked. Trade between Earth and its new allies slowed. Refugee ships turned back. But the Concorde had underestimated something simple: human stubbornness. Luis and his engineers began modifying freighters with stealth coatings made from asteroid dust and recycled polymers. Maya's team developed low-emission drive signatures that mimicked natural cosmic noise. Derek and his pilots learned to fly through asteroid fields and magnetic storms where Concorde sensors struggled. Small ships slipped through the blockade like ghosts, carrying medicine, seeds, and hope. Then came the incident, a Cathari vessel, overloaded with families fleeing a Concorde sweep near the Helios belt, sent a distress call. It was damaged, leaking atmosphere and drifting toward the blockade line. Derek launched without waiting for orders. He reached the ship just as a Concorde patrol moved to intercept. What happened next was seen by thousands through civilian telescopes and smuggler drones. The Concorde ship powered up its weapons. Derek placed his human vessel between them and the Cathari craft. He opened a channel, not to threaten but to speak. "This is Captain Derek Owens of Earth," he said, voice steady. "There are children on that ship. Stand down." The Concorde ship hesitated. Then, without warning, it fired, not at Derek's ship but at the Cathari vessel's engines, disabling it completely. The blast was precise, meant to stop, not kill. But it sent a message. Mercy ends here. Back on Earth, outrage spread. Not the loud kind, but the quiet, dangerous kind that fuels revolutions. People gathered in cities, not to riot, but to build. Factories ran day and night. Shipyards expanded. For the first time, Earth began constructing warships, not for conquest, but for protection. Luis oversaw the final assembly of the Odyssey, Earth's first capital-class vessel. It wasn't as sleek as Concorde ships. It wasn't covered in glowing runes or ancient tech. But it was strong. Its hull was layered with K3 alloys. Its shields used Maya's plasma deflectors. Its weapons were minimal, only enough to disable, not destroy. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened beyond Sol. Species within the conquered began to question. The Zenthians, the Mirel, even some Virel diplomats whispered doubts in closed chambers. Why punish those who only seek freedom? Why fear compassion? The more Earth helped the outcasts, the more the Concord's unity cracked. A secret message reached Maya from a Virel scientist. Your actions shine brighter than their laws, it read. We watch. We learn. When the Conquered demanded Earth hand over the Cathari refugees as a sign of obedience, Earth refused. The Conquered responded by destroying a human supply depot near Mars. Not with bombs, but with an energy pulse that fried all electronics. No lives were lost, but the message was clear. Next time, it won't be so gentle. Earth's answer came 3 days later. The Odyssey, with Derek at the helm and Louis coordinating systems from the bridge, moved to intercept a Concorde patrol harassing a refugee convoy near Neptune. This time, Earth didn't just shield the convoy, they acted. Using non-lethal EMP bursts and targeted tractor beams, they disabled the Concorde ship's weapons and engines without harming the crew. Then Derek broadcast a message across all channels. You can blockade space, but you can't blockade decency. Leave these people alone. The disabled Conquered vessel drifted for hours before a rescue ship arrived. No shots were fired, no lives taken, but the galaxy took notice. News of the encounter spread faster than any signal Earth could send. Outcast species cheered. Neutral traders shared the footage. Even some Conquered citizens questioned their leaders. How could a species banned for being unstable show more control than the Concorde itself? Back on Earth, people didn't celebrate with parades. They worked harder. Farmers grew more food. Engineers refined better shields. Teachers taught children that strength isn't in how hard you hit, but in how well you protect. Louis stood on the observation deck of the Odyssey after the mission, looking at the stars. He thought of the first time he'd seen an alien ship, full of wonder. Now he saw something else, possibility. Not of war, but of a new way. Maya, in her lab, received another secret message, this time from 3 different species. They wanted to talk, not as beggars, but as equals. The blockade still stood. The Conquered still held power. But something had shifted. Earth was no longer just a planet under ban. It was becoming a symbol. And symbols once born are hard to erase. The galaxy had tried to silence humanity. Instead, it had given them a voice, and others were finally listening. The first colony wasn't on a planet. It was on a promise. Floating in the quiet space between stars, far from Sol and farther still from Conquered patrols, a ring-shaped station slowly took shape. Its frame was built from salvaged hulls, asteroid metal and alloys shared by the Cathari. Solar collectors stretched like petals around it, drinking in light from a nameless sun. Inside, gardens grew earthwheat beside Cathari blue vines, and children of 6 different species played in corridors lit by soft, human-made lamps. They called it Haven 1. Luis Martinez walked its central hub, his boots clicking against the recycled steel floor. He wasn't an engineer anymore, not just one. He was a builder of homes. Around him, humans worked side by side with Zenthians, Mirel, and even a few quiet Viril who had slipped away from the Concorde. No one asked for papers. No one checked registries. If you came in peace, you belonged. Maya Patel stood in the station's observation lounge watching a shuttle dock. It carried seeds, medicine, and a new group of refugees, families who had heard the rumors and followed the quiet signals. She no longer wore a lab coat. She wore the simple gray tunic of the Stellar Accord, the alliance Earth had helped form not through treaties of power, but through acts of care. The Accord had no throne, no capital, no army of conquest. It had shared farms, joint shipyards, and schools where human children learned Cathari songs and alien kids practiced Earth math. Derek Owens landed his ship, the Odyssey, in the main bay. He stepped out not as a soldier, but as a guide. Young pilots from 3 species waited to learn from him, not how to fight, but how to navigate the dark safely, how to read a distress call, how to offer help without taking control. He smiled when a small Morel child handed him a drawing of his ship with wings. "It flies with heart," the child said in broken standard. Derek kept the drawing in his cockpit. The Galactic Concorde still existed, but it was changing. After the incident near Neptune, cracks had spread through its ranks. Species once silent now spoke up. Some left openly, Others sent secret aid. The Concord's leaders tried to hold firm, but their authority was built on fear. And fear cannot stand when hope spreads. Earth no longer begged for a seat at anyone's table. It had built its own. And it kept building. Shipyards near Mars now produced vessels for allies, not just humans. Factories on Luna made air recyclers that worked for 10 different biologies. In Geneva, the old council chamber had been replaced by a round hall where representatives from 23 species met as equals. Decisions were made by consensus, not command. Luis often thought back to the day the ban arrived. He remembered the silence, the shame, the feeling of being cast out. Now he saw something else, freedom. Without the Concord's rules, humanity had been forced to ask what it truly valued. Not speed, not strength, but fairness, ingenuity, kindness that didn't expect reward. Maya walked through Haven 1's central garden one evening. The air smelled of damp soil and blooming night flowers, a mix of earth and Cathari life. Vela joined her, her gray skin glowing softly in the low light. "You built this without taking," Vela said. "That is rare in the galaxy." "We didn't build it alone," Maya replied, and that was the truth. The new empire, though no one called it that, wasn't human. It was shared. It grew not from conquest but from connection. When a drought hit a Zenthian settlement, Earth sent water purifiers. When a K3 lab discovered a cure for a rare lung sickness, they sent it to human outposts without asking for payment. Trust became the real currency. Derek took a new mission that week. Not to fight, but to explore. A signal had come from a distant system, faint, old, possibly pre-conquered. It might be ruins. It might be nothing. But someone had to go see. He wasn't alone. His crew included a Morel navigator, a Virel linguist, and a young human engineer named Rosa, Luis's niece, who carried her aunt's old coffee thermos like a good luck charm. As the Odyssey jumped into the unknown, people on Haven 1 watched from the observation deck. No one cheered. No one made speeches. They just stood together, quiet and proud. Back on Earth, cities had changed. Skyscrapers now housed vertical farms. Streets were quieter, cleaner, powered by fusion plants built in the deserts. Children learned that the stars weren't owned by anyone, that space belonged to those brave enough to care for it. The ban had been meant to end humanity's story. Instead, it had rewritten it. Earth hadn't returned to the galaxy as a subject or a rival. It had become something new, a place others looked to not for power but for hope. Luis stood on Haven 1's outer rim one night, looking out at the stars. They were the same stars the Concord had used to shut Earth out. But now, those stars were filled with ships bearing the simple emblem of the Stellar Accord, a circle with a single hand reaching out. He thought of his sister Rosa, still tending her garden in New Mexico. He thought of Maya, teaching alien students how to grow food in harsh soil. He thought of Derek, flying into the dark with friends from worlds he'd never imagined as a boy. They hadn't built an empire of thrones and taxes. They'd built one of open doors and shared tables. And in a galaxy that had forgotten how to welcome, that was the most revolutionary thing of all. The stars no longer felt distant. They felt like neighbors. And Earth, once banned and alone, was finally home, not just for humans, but for anyone who believed in a better way.